السيد الرئيس، أريد أن أعلمكم أننا في هذه البلد في سوريا أن الحادثة ليس الحادثة، الجريمة النكراء التي تمت البارحة في كنيسة مارلياس هي الأولى في سوريا من بعد طوشة الشام سنة 1860. من سنة 1860 حتى الآن هي المجزرة الأولى التي تحصل. نأسف، سأقولها بجرأة، نأسف سيادة الرئيس أن هذه الجريمة التي تمت في كنيسة مارلياس المروعة لم نرى واحدا من المسؤولين في الحكومة أو في الدولة عدا السيدة هند قبوات المسيحية أتى إلى موقع الجريمة. وبكل احترام وتقدير سيادة الرئيس، تكلمتم البارحة هاتفيا مع سيادة الوكيل البطريركي لتنقلوا لنا عزاءكم. لا يكفينا هذا. مشكورين على المكالمة الهاتفية، ولكن الجريمة التي تمت هي أكبر من هيك شوي. هؤلاء الشهداء الجسامين الذين أمامنا والذين دفنوا، هؤلاء ليسوا كما قال بعض المسؤولين، ليسوا هم قتلى، وليسوا هم الذين قضوا بما حصل. إنهم، وهذا صوتنا جميعا، إنهم شهداء حقيقيون. وأتجرأ أحبتي وأقول إنهم شهداء الدين والوطن.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. It seems that there is a problem with the webcam, which just decided to disconnect at the same moment that I started this live streaming, which is a message from the technologies that we use. Now it's back. How are you doing, guys? Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching the stream on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjin Word. I will also check the microphone because it changes also. Yes, exactly. As I expected. So the podcast microphone, now it goes back to normal. Thank you very much, those who are watching on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjin Word. As you watch this very short clip of the Patriarch after the terrorist attack against San Elias Church in Damascus, which killed over 30 worshippers, he has given this daring speech, and he dared to criticize in a bold manner the regime of Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. And he basically told him that our victims of these terrorist attacks are not just simply victims, or they were killed by what happened, because this is how they reported it on the Syrian state TV outlets and the mouthpieces of the Jolani regime. He said, these are true martyrs of our religion and martyrs of the homeland. He also criticized Jolani for not declaring 3 days of mourning over the victims of this terrorist attack. And he only called one of the representatives of the churches, and he delivered his condolences. And he said, this is not enough. The only Syrian official who visited the church to deliver the condolences was Hind Qabawat. And Hind Qabawat is a Syrian Christian minister who was called, I believe she used to live in Canada, and she was called by her handlers, telling her that she has to go back to Syria and become a minister because they needed a woman who is unveiled, which means she doesn't wear a hijab, and they needed a Christian woman, and they needed a woman. So it's all about identity politics, of course, for them, right? To give this false picture about the Jolani regime, that this regime is inclusive and they respect women and they respect minorities or Christianity. Therefore, I would like to firstly say and ask Hind Qabawat, aren't you ashamed of yourself for being a minister in such a terrorist regime, whitewashing a takfiri terrorist government whose own forces have likely and highly likely carried out this terrorist attack? This was not an attack by ISIS, guys. There is a high probability that this attack was carried out by the forces of the regime itself. And Hind Qabawat, she knows it. And she's still in her position. That's why I ask her, aren't you ashamed of yourself? When the regime change happened on the 8th of December 2024, Hind Qabawat left a comment on Facebook directing her message to me and to my cousin, Kamil Otrakci, vowing and promising us that once she goes to Syria, she will dig in and she will find out how much money the Assad regime, and specifically the former First Lady of Syria, Asma al-Assad, has paid to me and to Kamil Otrakci to do this, what she called an Assadist propaganda. So around 7 months passed, 7 months minus 1 week have passed to her comment. And I would like to ask her what happened to her investigation and what happened to the exposure that she was going to do about me and my cousin being paid allegedly by the Assad regime. So it seems that she is busy with whitewashing the Jolani regime and she didn't have much time at her hands. And even if she had time at her hands, she will not find anything. So good luck, Hind Qabawat. Bravo for being part of such a vile regime. Meanwhile, when I was accused of supporting the Assad regime in the past, and despite all the offers and despite all the attractions that I received to become part of official institutions in Syria, I rejected them all. And I didn't become part of any political regime or any political party, not in the past and not now. Before I continue today's stream and conversation with you guys, 22nd of June was my birthday, and I turned 38 years old. And I received this sweet gift. As you can see, this t-shirt with the logo of Syriana Analysis. One of them is white and the other one is black. And this is from my brother. And he also sent me a card. I would like to read it for you. He says, "Wear this shirt proudly, brother. It's more than just a logo. It is your voice, your passion, your purpose. You're already changing thousands of lives. And I know millions are next. Keep going, keep pushing, and keep it bold as usual." Your sincere top fan, your brother. I really like this gift, and I will wear it proudly. And in the next stream, I will wear the black one. I think I just have to do a little bit zoom out for the webcam so that you guys can always see my logo here. Anyways, after we address this very simple issue, the terrorist attack, it's like a simple issue in my mind because we all know who carried out this attack, and I'm going to show some of the evidence for it now to you guys. But before that, I would like to thank also our friend Dietman for being a moderator of this live chat. Guys, this week, Israeli media outlets reported that Syria's self-selected president, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, will soon meet with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is still carrying out one of the most heinous, brutal, inhumane acts of barbarism and onslaughts against our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And the numbers in the Gaza Strip has reached over 100,000, according to independent researchers. This has nothing to do with the Hamas-run health ministry that the mainstream media always tries to downplay it. So, as you may know, guys, in September every year, there is this annual meeting in the UN for the UN General Assembly. And this year, for the first time in the history of our beautiful rules-based international order, the founder of the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria will represent the Syrian Arab Republic. If you're a Syrian and you are not ashamed of this, there is something wrong. Believe me, there is something seriously wrong in the head and in the soul and in the conscious and in every fiber in your body. This is the worst chapter in the history of the modern Syrian statehood. And Abu Muhammad al-Jolani is going to represent us in the UN General Assembly. So the Israeli media outlets, they cited Arabic sources. Arabic sources are basically either from the UAE or from Saudi Arabia. This is where the Israelis have most of their contacts among the Arab diplomats and Arab secret services. And they told the Israeli press that Prime Minister of Israel will likely hold meetings on the sideline of the upcoming UN General Assembly meeting. And the statement from this official says that the relationship between the two countries could be of great importance. Both are effectively against Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Iran, and Hezbollah. So this is the Arab source basically telling the Israeli press that there is a mutual ground between Israel and Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, and that is their animosity for Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad. So basically, the animosity for the armed resistance against the Israeli occupation forces. And in this case, a second source, this time they are from Syria, from the Jolani regime itself. They claimed that Damascus will eventually give up on the Golan Heights for Israel in exchange for the normalization of relations with the Israeli side. Now, I'm going to do something, and I would like to read your comments, guys, in the live chat. Please let me know if you can hear this article, because what I'm going to do basically is to screen an article to you, and I'm going to ask the website to read it for us. And while it is reading for us, I will make commentaries on this article. But firstly, please let me know if you can hear it.
Heading for a deal? Syrian sources confirm we are in talks with Israel as conditions form. Lior Ben Ari.
Do you guys hear the article when I'm playing it? Yes, great. So let's continue.
Omar Eichner. Discussions about a potential Israel-Syria agreement continued in Arab media Saturday. London-based Saudi newspaper Sharq al-Awsat published an article titled, "Is Syria Ready for Peace with Israel?" Sources close to Damascus government told the paper that indirect negotiations are underway with regional and international backing, previously acknowledged by Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara.
So there are indirect talks between Israel and the current Jolani regime, and this is endorsed by regional and international backing. The regional is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey, and the UAE, of course. And the international is, of course, the United States and the EU.
Syria demands an end to Israeli attacks and incursions into its territory and seeks a return to the 1974 disengagement agreement. Israel aims to establish a new buffer zone and a security deal, paving the way for future comprehensive peace is likely. The sources ruled out an immediate permanent agreement but left room for a framework leading to permanent or Abraham Accords-style deals. They described a rapidly evolving process, with Damascus relying on Arab mediation to preserve sovereignty and hoping Western pressure will compel Israel to stop the attack.
So basically, the Jolani regime is hoping that an international pressure against them would stop the Israeli attacks. Now, what the Syrian side, the regime, is asking for, basically, is for Israel to withdraw from the territories they have occupied recently after the regime change, which means Mount Hermon, and they would like to bargain that and keep the Golan Heights in the hands of Israel in exchange for taking back Mount Hermon. Now, this is my opinion. I believe that the Israelis will never, ever give up on Mount Hermon. But hear me out, there is a catch, and there could be another way for the Israelis to reach that in order to appease everyone. So that also Jolani, because when he wants to sell this agreement in front of his own people, he also has to give some justifications, right? So what could be the middle ground? Let's first continue reading this article.
Al-Shara strongly desires a deal but conditions it on swift Israeli withdrawal from positions inside Syria, a demand Jerusalem opposes. Talks reportedly explore delaying or softening withdrawals. Informed sources suggest Syria is pushing more urgently for a settlement than Israel.
So basically they're saying that the Syrian side or the Jolani side is pushing for a normalization of relations even more than what the Israelis want. So they're more interested in such peace. And if you remember in the past streams, I said, why would Israel make a deal with the Jolani regime? They have achieved their strategic goals in Syria, right? And now Jolani wants to strike this deal because he wants to get support from the US and also, of course, from Israel. Now, in this case, the major issue is the Golan Heights and the Mount of Hermon, right? What is going to happen next, in my opinion, is that Jolani needs a PR to sell this peace agreement to his people and to the region before him being called a traitor, right? So what they're going to do is, just my opinion, Israel will keep the Golan Heights completely in its hands. They will never, ever, ever give it up to the Syrian side. But in the area of Mount Hermon, they could create what is called a peace zone. Peace and coexistence, peace and love, you know? So what would happen here is complete demilitarization of the region, in exception for the Israeli Air Force, which can establish basically a de facto control over not only the airspace, but also the field, the ground, the mountain. And by doing so, they would say that the Israelis have withdrawn from Mount of Hermon and we liberated it through diplomatic means. And therefore, this is a victory for us, and we are not ready to fight against Israel. We don't have an army, we don't have an air defenses. So let's take what we can now, which is nothing basically. It's like this empty hamburger strategy, right? What Israel is giving you, it's like a hamburger, and there is a meat inside, but they're holding the meat with a rope. And once you take the hamburger, they keep the meat to themselves. This is the strategy, what the Israelis are trying to do, so that they could normalize ties with Damascus. They could open an embassy in Damascus and at the same time keep their grip and control not only over the Golan Heights, but also over Mount Hermon.
The deal referenced by Syria established ceasefire lines in a UN-monitored buffer zone, UNDOV, after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Israel withdrew from the Syrian salient, Mount Hermon peaks and areas near Quneitra. The agreement held until December 2023, when IDF forces entered the buffer zone after Bashar Assad's regime fell. Under al-Shara, the border dynamic shifted. Israel now operates in previously demilitarized zones and demanded full demilitarization south of Damascus. This month, Emirati site Aram News reported Syria's General Security Directorate preparing to deploy troops in southern Syria for the first time since Assad's ouster, allegedly with Israeli approval and U.S. pressure. Get the Ynet News app on your smartphone, Google Play, http.
Anyways, you understood the general premise of this possible agreement. One of our friends says, I'm sorry, but loads of Syrians who came to Europe love Giuliani. They make me sick. Well, what can I say, my friend? When in 2016, I dared to say that most of the Syrians I met in Germany were either supportive of the Islamists in Syria or Islamists themselves. I was called a fascist, so I stopped talking about this issue. And I didn't want to provoke also the Syrian community in Germany, who I mean, some of their individuals have proven to be violent, and they have attacked me multiple times physically. And to be honest with you, I'm not really, my soul is not really cheap. And I don't think that I deserve to be killed in such senseless manner by a brainless person who thinks that I'm his, his worst nightmare, basically. And I'm also happy that they don't watch this Syriana Analysis much and they don't understand, most of them, English, so I could continue my work like this without putting myself in greater jeopardy. But we have to be honest. We have to be honest. Most Syrians living in Germany and in Europe support Giuliani. This is just my subjective opinion. So if you have something else to say, or you could probably say that I'm wrong, you could prove that is wrong. I'm just saying from my daily and weekly and monthly and almost 10 years of living in Germany, this is the conclusion which I came to. And some of my European friends in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in other countries, they expressed similar sentiments to me, said, wow, they were shocked, because what they thought is that, yes, these people fled probably from the Assad government. This is what they said when they arrived in Europe. But they didn't say that they support Giuliani. So some of their European neighbors now shocked to the fact that first they support Giuliani, and they support Giuliani from Europe, and they don't want to go back to Syria. So if you like Giuliani and if you like its regime and you think that Syria is safe now because you liberated your country and you think that Syria will become soon what they say, the Indonesia or the Malaysia or whatever of the Middle East, then why don't you go and contribute to that, right? And I believe the vast majority of the Syrians who support Giuliani, they will not go back to Syria. They will just stay here and receive their citizenship, and they will continue their support for the Giuliani regime from Europe. In this context of trying to, make a hero of Giuliani, the Turkish state media, TRT, but this is the TRT International, which means the TRT which speaks in English, and they direct their talk to the European and the American audiences. They have done something spectacular and hilarious here. They have published a video. This is the TRT World. They say a senior Daesh figure, so senior ISIS figure with alleged Hezbollah ties, reportedly tried to assassinate Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara during a recent visit to the city. When we say there is an attempt for history revisionism, And this is not exclusive to files related to Ukraine or World War II, or, this is now a general trend. They're not only trying to rewrite the history of the past 14 years of war by linking Hezbollah to Daesh. Hezbollah and ISIS, they are arch enemies. And Hezbollah and ISIS have fought against each other in a very brutal manner. Hezbollah has paid hundreds of its soldiers fighting against ISIS. And ISIS has carried out terrorist attacks in Hezbollah strongholds in Lebanon. And basically, ISIS is a product of a coordinated intelligence work between the MIT, the Qatari intelligence, the Saudi intelligence, the Americans. They were all involved in nurturing and allowing the emergence of ISIS in Syria. What happened basically when ISIS started expanding in Syria, they were a small organization, right? And then the Americans allowed them to occupy the oil fields. And once they occupied the oil fields in Syria, they started selling the oil of Syria to Turkey. Now, Turkey is a NATO country. And the person who used to be in charge of buying ISIS oil, selling it, and giving cash money to ISIS, which, thanks to this operation, has shifted and moved from an organization into a state, because now it's financially independent and they have lots of money with millions of dollars of selling this oil. This was done by the son of Erdogan, Bilal. And Turkey had a direct role in supporting and allowing tens of thousands of multinational Takfiri terrorists to come from all around the world, land in Turkey, go to the borders and just cross the borders to Raqqa and become ISIS terrorists and their families. In September 2014, I was in Istanbul with my dear friend Marwa Osman. Most of you know Marwa Osman, and we were both invited to a conference in Istanbul. And we were at a hotel. While we were at a hotel, having breakfast in the morning, there were 4 Libyan men in the restaurant for breakfast, very loud, very disrespectful, harassing a woman, including Marwa. And 4 of them were injured. One of them had an injury here on his belly. One of them, his eyes were gone. One of them, his arm is gone. Each and every single one of them had this Salafi beard without a mustache. What do you think these people were? They were ISIS terrorists exported from Libya to Syria via Turkish intelligence. And once they got injured during the hostilities, they go back to Turkey to receive medical treatment. This is the same thing that Israel has done with Al-Qaeda. Turkey received ISIS fighters and given them medical treatment, and the Israeli side received Jolani's Al-Qaeda terrorists in the field hospitals in the Golan Heights and given them medical treatment and cash for their leadership and light weapons. Those are the things that the Israeli press says it is true. So probably the truth is even beyond this and even worse than this, right? In any ways, now there is this attempt by different media outlets, one of which I showed you from the TRT, to make Jolani look like a hero and also look like he's against ISIS. Because after this terrorist attack against the church, which the army, the forces of the Jolani regime themselves carried out this attack, they now blame ISIS for it because they want to give the Americans the argument that they are separating themselves from the terrorists and they will fight the terrorists themselves. And if they want for the Christians, for the Alawites, for the rest to be protected from ISIS, they have to legitimize this regime because this is the only military force in the country capable of fighting against the remnants of ISIS. Now, in this context, what the TRT is doing basically, which is what Erdogan wants, because TRT is paid by the Turkish government and they are the mouthpiece of Erdogan, another media outlet in the region whose job has always been to capitalize on sectarian hatred and amplify the sectarian hatred in the region for political goals and ends is Al Jazeera. And both Turkey and Al Jazeera are in exact same camp with Jolani. They don't differ at all how to handle the situation in Syria, and both of them are handlers, basically, or one of the handlers of Jolani. Now, after this terrorist attack against the church, and the speech of the Patriarch, which I showed you at the beginning of this live streaming, the minions of Jolani received instructions from the Jolani regime to wage a brutal smear campaign against the Patriarch by calling him Assad regime remnant, by calling him, by claiming that in the past he used to receive financial support from outside for the church, but he used to finance the Assad regime militias to kill the Syrian people. This is what they're saying. So if you understand anything about this rhetoric, you know that this is a call for killing. They want to kill the Patriarch. They will try to kill him. So what would Al Jazeera do? Basically, they start amplifying anti-Christian voices. Now, there are probably hundreds of brainless sheikhs and imams and radical takfiris all around the Arabic world who have social media accounts and they have podiums and they are talking and spewing hatred day and night. If you go to any other country with a different language, you will find always people, radicalized people, spewing hatred and calling for mobilization and incitement against other religions, sects, ethnicities, or political opponents. But most of these people are on the fringe of the political discourse and the political discussion, and no major media outlet comes and amplifies their voices, so they create a problem within their own country. Or when they do it in a very calculated manner to dismiss and criticize and undermine these voices, right? Unless it's, of course, politically convenient. Now, in Syria, it is politically convenient to amplify the anti-Christian voices after this terrorist attack. And this is Al Jazeera, just going to show you. This is Al Jazeera, which directs its speech to Al Jazeera Syria. This is Al Jazeera Syria, as you can see, AG Syria now. So basically, they have published or reposted a video of a radical sheikh. He's from Lebanon, and they said the Lebanese Sheikh Muhammad Al-Ali Al-Hussein addresses a message to Patriarch Yazigi following his statement after the bombing of Mar Elias Church in Damascus. So the entire premise of the video it's in Arabic. I'm not going to play it now. The entire premise of it is criticizing the Patriarch Yazigi and basically saying that where were you in the past 14 years when the Assad regime was killing and Assad regime was dropping barrel bombs and chemical attacks and we were being killed day and night and you didn't say a word. Now that only 30 people were killed or died from your people, you started criticizing the Jolani regime. And he mobilizes the people with his very hysterical. I just want to show you, maybe, even if you don't understand Arabic, guys, I'm sure you see from his body language, right? I just want to show you his body language so you understand the type of speech and rhetoric we're being fed. Look, look how is he yelling and shouting. See. So he's claiming basically that the Assad regime used to bomb the churches and kill the worshippers inside the churches. And he says you didn't say a word. Of course, this is false because it never happened. Anyways, he continues his sensational speech, and yeah. So this is the problem with the Arab world. We have lots of people with big mouths like this. Yeah. So he says, like you were hanging around with Putin and hanging around with Bashar, and you were giving them hugs. So basically, he says you were basically blessing the killing of 2 million Syrians, some of them on the ground and some of them under the ground. So this is the problem. This is a serious problem. This is a serious problem that we don't have the power to change this narrative, to be honest with you. If you speak to 100 Jolani supporters, 99 of them believe that the Assad regime killed between 1 million to 2 million Sunni Muslims. And there is no way to discuss about this and argue. This is just a given fact for them. The truth of the matter is, of course, the number of the casualties are between 500 to 600,000 dead during 14 years. 1/3 of it were from the Syrian army soldiers, which means those who fought alongside the government in Syria. And that also means that they were not killed by peaceful slogans and banners and papers and documents. So somebody was fighting against them, right? How would you lose 160, 170,000 soldiers, basically, during the discourse of a war if there was no armed opponent to you, right? But how can you really talk about this? How can you convince them of this? So 1/3 was Syrian army soldiers, and around 140 to 50,000 of them were from the so-called Free Syrian Army, Islam's Army, Ahrar Sham, Al-Nusra Front, ISIS, Jabhat Shamiye, etc., etc. And those were all these radical terrorist groups. So we have around 350,000 to 400,000 were militants from both sides. The rest were civilians, and this is the true and unfortunate truth about this conflict. And I'm not trying to undermine or underestimate at all the human toll or the civilian toll, because this is really serious matter, guys. There are tens of thousands of civilians got killed, but they were not killed in one location. They were killed on the entirety of the Syrian war. And in the entirety of the Syrian war, there were moments when the Syrian army was fighting against terrorist groups. And in the discourse of it, both sides killed civilians. And there were times when the rebels, so-called rebels, were fighting among themselves. And there were moments when ISIS and Al-Qaeda were fighting together against the Syrian army. And there were moments when Al-Qaeda and ISIS were fighting against each other. And there were moments when some of the so-called rebels or the terrorist groups were fighting against the Kurdish people. And there were moments when they were fighting against the Druze, when there were moments they were fighting explicitly against the Alawites. So the killing happened from all sides. I'm talking about the civilians. So throwing numbers in the air, saying like, oh, 1 million people died. Those are all killed by the Assad regime. Now he starts 2 million. If we wait for a few more weeks, it will be 3 million, This is a type of history revisionism which is disgusting and ridiculous. And if you say a word of logic about it, you're an Assad regime remnant. You're an Assad regime apologist, right? But I'm showing you the facts. I'm showing you the facts. And they're not only trying to revise this history of this conflict, they're trying to revise the entire history of Syria since its inception after the independence. And one of the most important things they're trying to do here is to rewrite the history books in Syria. There are two things very important they are going to do. During the French mandate and French occupation of Syria, one of the active forces who fought against the French occupation were the Alawites and the Druze. The leaders of the armed resistance against the foreign occupation, there were many of them from the Alawite and the Druze communities. And what they're going to do is to remove these from the history texts. Imagine. And the second thing they're going to do now in Syria, this is again absurd, it's beyond surreal. Jolani now is selling the Golan Heights to Israel. And to whitewash his betrayal and treason, he's going to change now the history books in Syria and claim in the history books that our children will study in the near future that Hafiz al-Assad sold the Golan to Israel in the 1967 war. Now, 1967 war was a war that Syria lost against Israel, and Hafiz al-Assad was the defense minister. Now, anyone who knows anything about Syria and the Syrian army knows that the chief of staff is the one who manages the hostilities, whether defense or offense. And Hafiz al-Assad didn't have that position back then, and he didn't have a say when the war should stop or how the Syrian army should carry out attacks or withdraw or give up a land. But they say that Hafiz al-Assad sold the Golan for $50 million or something. Now, if that is true, of course, there is no source for it, except for, if you ask them for the source, it's just trust me, bro, or probably the niece of their grandmother's neighbor who heard something from the nephew of the brother's fiance, who was back then somewhere near the Golan. This is what they say. They start talking about what their grandmother of the grandmother said something about something. There are no any tacit or public agreement about this, and if that was the case, the Israelis have had now the chance to reveal the collaboration of the former regime with Israel. And they have never done that because there is none. There is a book called Defending the Holy Land. It's like an 800 pages book, which it's an Israeli book, by the way, and they bring the PhDs in the Israeli universities, basically, which addresses the 67 and the 73 wars. And they write with great detail about the discourse of this conflict. And Syria basically lost the war in 67. And if that was the case, right, let's suppose for an argument's sake that Hafiz al-Assad sold the Golan to Israel. Do you also mean that in 73, when Hafiz al-Assad and Anwar al-Sadat, when Hafiz al-Assad in 67 was not the president of Syria, as I mentioned, he was a defense minister, he was not the chief of staff, but later in the 1970, he became the president, right? 3 years later, he planned a surprise attack against Israel with Egypt, Anwar al-Sadat. So if he sold the Golan, why would he attack Israel again to capture the Golan? And he did capture the Golan, and he did liberate the Golan. What happened, unfortunately, back then, that Anwar Sadat stopped his advances in the Sinai, and he called for the Americans to intervene and broker a deal between them and the Israelis, cessation of hostilities, and at the end, he would strike a peace agreement with Israel. This is what happened once the Egyptian army, which is the biggest in the region against Israel, and the most effective one, the Syrian one, was the smaller army during this war. Israel redirected all its military energy on the Syrian front. And they have pushed the Syrian army again out of the Golan. The Syrians managed to keep the Mount Hermon in Al-Qunaytira. This is the highest hill overseeing the Golan deep inside the occupied Palestinian territories, right? So how is it that he sold it and then he fought for it? There is no logic behind it. Anyways, we have a brilliant article, guys, by the correspondent of the Cradle in Syria, and we are withholding his identity because we don't want to harm him. And he is reporting from Syria. And this is the article: Syria's Christians targeted again, this time by those claiming to protect them. During Sunday, and this is the article which has lots of evidence in it that this attack was carried out by the Jolani regime itself. During Sunday Mass at Mar Elias Church, or San Elias Church in Al Duwailah neighborhood, the attacker opened fire on worshippers with an automatic weapon before detonating his explosive vest. Within 15 minutes, guys, 15 minutes, the Syrian Ministry of Interior Affairs blamed ISIS and named the perpetrator as a suicide bomber. But many found it suspicious that Interior Minister Anas Khattab, who is himself a co-founder of the Nusra Front, which is the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria, once blacklisted as a terrorist by the UN Security Council, could claim to know the identity of the perpetrator and the organization behind him so quickly. The following day, Khattab claimed, and he posted this on X, that his forces had discovered the ISIS cell responsible for the attack and carried out a raid targeting its members in the Damascus suburbs, leading to clashes, multiple arrests, and 2 deaths. However, footage of the raid showed it was clearly fake. The footage that the Jolani regime itself published, claiming that they have stormed an ISIS secret cell on the suburbs of Damascus, was, guys, clearly fake, suggesting no such clashes had taken place and that the operation was a staged photo op. Now, I'm not going to try to convince you that this is a fake, but I'm going to show you the video. And I believe that by watching this video, you could make up your mind yourself, and you guys can tell me whether or not this is a real footage or this is a staged footage by the Jolani regime, which they say and claim that they have stormed a secret ISIS cell in the suburbs of Damascus, and they clashed with these ISIS terrorists and detained some of them. Let's take a look.
انتهت العملية الأمنية التي استهدفت أوكار تابعة لتنظيم الدولة في المنطقة بعد حدوث اشتباك مع خلية تابعة لتنظيم الدولة. تم إلقاء القبض على رأس ومتزعم هذه الخلية وتحييد العنصر الآخر، ثم داهمت عناصر الأمن الداخلي بقية الأوكار. هذا تم القبض على شخصين آخرين، كما تم ضبط عدد من الأسلحة والعبوات وموتور كان مجهز للتفخيخ استهداف أهل المدنيين في المنطقة. طبعا تستمر عمليات إدارة الأمن الداخلي بملاحقة خلايا فلول نظام الزائد وخلايا عصابات الغلو، وتحاول استهداف أهلنا في المنطقة. بإذن الله عز وجل سيعم الأمن والأمان على أهلنا، ولن يكون أي شيء يعكر صفو الأمن في المناطق.
So this is the video. They say they have stormed the ISIS cell. They don't show us their faces. They don't show us who they are, basically. And one of the people who they basically detained, and they posted his photo on social media, his parents posted a post on Facebook basically pleading and begging the Jolani regime to release him, saying, this person traveled from Idlib to Damascus today with his cousin, I think his cousin or the son of his brother. So this boy is like 9 years old or something. And on his way to Damascus, at the entrance of Damascus, they have detained him and they took him to the detention center, and they took a photo of him and they posted him on the social media platforms claiming that he was part of the ISIS cell. So they're desperate, trying to find to blame it on ISIS. But why? Why? This is the real question. Why are they so desperate? Because they want to tell the world that they are the force fighting against ISIS. However, in the days following the San Elias bombing, the narrative suggesting ISIS was responsible for the attack began to fall apart, with reports emerging that the attackers were not members of ISIS, but the government's own General Security and Ministry of Defense. We even know, guys, the names of the perpetrators, right? Journalist Aus Nizar Darwish reported that the perpetrator of the Mar Elias Church suicide bombing was a member of Khattab's General Security Force. Khattab is the Minister of Interior, who himself, after 15 minutes, blamed ISIS. The journalist Darwish said that according to a person close to the event, the man who detonated the suicide belt was 18-year-old and his name was Ziad Anwar al-Idalbi, and he is a member of Jolani's General Security. So he's an 18-years-old brainwashed terrorist from Idlib, and he was a member of the Jolani's own General Security or the Interior Ministry, which Khattab basically is the head of it. Darwish reported that Idlibi was the same person who 2 weeks ago came to the Dawal'a neighborhood. This is the same neighborhood where the terrorist attack happened, and drove through the streets threatening Christians and calling on them to convert to Islam. So what they basically do, they come with a pickup truck and they have like an amplifiers, these loudspeakers behind the truck, and they start calling Christians to convert to Islam. And in one of these cases I showed you in previous streams, they were kicked out of the area by some Christian men and even Muslim men who came and challenged them and pushed them out of the neighborhood, telling them everybody is free to believe in whatever they want. And this guy came calling people to convert to Islam. He's the same one who carried out this terrorist attack against this church. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is a notorious anti-Assad organization, reported that, according to reliable sources, a member of the Syrian Ministry of Defense from Deir ez-Zor province participated in the attack and was among the injured taken to the hospital afterwards. So basically, it could be, and there is a possibility, that there were 3 attackers and not 2. So one of them detonated himself. I think the other one fled. And the third one, who is from Deir ez-Zor, who also belongs to the General Security of Jolani, he fled the scene because he was injured during the explosion. Christians now are reminded after the attack of the hostility that members of the so-called Syrian government hold toward their faith. Government statements condemning the bombing of the Mar Elias Church have angered Christians, as they fail to call those killed in the bombing martyrs, simply calling them victims instead. Old video footage circulated online among the Christian community of Syria's defense minister, guys. The defense minister of Syria, under Jolani, who is a Major General Murhaf Abu Qasra, destroying a statue of the Virgin Mary. The video was filmed when Abu Qasra was a commander in HTS, the former Al-Qaeda affiliate during the CIA-backed war against former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government. So this is allegedly, guys, this is the same guy who is now the defense minister of Syria. And this is also reported on Egyptian TV outlet, right? An Egyptian TV outlet, they also speak about him. So they say this is the this terrorist is the defense minister of Syria. So this and this. And this guy has become now the defense minister.
هذا الإرهابي السافل الذي يتولى وزارة الدفاع السوري الآن ويتقبله المسؤولون العرب ويذهب إليه ولسيده وأمير جماعته الإرهابية الجولاني المسؤولون الغربيون. ها هو موقفه، رؤيته، عقيدته، منهجه في التعامل مع المسيحية ومع المسيحيين ومع السيدة مريم العذراء في أيقونة وتمثال. بينما حقيقتهم هذه حقيقتهم. شفنا
So, the defense minister of Syria, when he was a commander in Al-Qaeda, he had the statue of Virgin Mary in one of the towns in Latakia, where there used to be lots of Christians and Armenians. And he carried this Virgin Mary statue and he broke it on the floor. Those are the same ones now in power in Damascus. So if you think, if you really think that this terrorist attack, and I'm sorry that I'm laughing about it because it is it's beyond explainable, you know. If you think that this was an attack carried out by ISIS and not the Jolani regime against the Christians, then I have a brand new mRNA vaccine to sell you guys with 2 boosters. Let's continue. So this brings to mind this type of barbarity by the Jolani regime, brings to mind the sectarian slogan once proclaimed by the Syrian rebels. So at the beginning of the revolution, guys, for those who don't know, so-called revolution in 2011, when they started going to the streets and calling for democracy and human rights, but we heard something else. They were not calling for democracy. They were saying, quote, the Alawites to the grave, the Christians to Beirut. This is what they said. Since Jolani and HTS came to power in Damascus, Christians have been worried about their future in Syria. Once regarded as a cradle of Christian heritage, where some Paul is said to have experienced his conversion, Damascus has increasingly become synonymous with insecurity and sectarian violence. With San Elias bombing, the threat that the Christians would be next has come true. As political analyst Kevork Almassian observed, 90% of Syria's Christians have already fled, driven out by the CIA-led regime change war. Even more left after the Al-Qaeda regime took power in Damascus. Now suicide bombers target the few who remain, striking inside churches. Syria's Christians have no one left on their side. No one. And he ends the article by saying their erasure is no longer collateral. It is the inevitable outcome of a state now governed by the very forces that once pledged to destroy them. But nobody cares about them. Guys, nobody cares about them. Nobody cares about the Christians. Nobody cares about the Alawites. I'm not going to go so much into details of this article, just for you to know this is a new Reuters article published, how Syrian government forces and factions are linked to the mass killings of the Alawites, and they're documenting the participation of the Jolani forces basically in these heinous acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing against the minorities in Homs, in Hama, in Latakia, in Jable, in Banyas. And there is a second article by Reuters. I don't know why Reuters recently has waken up on this unfortunate fact in Syria. And this is another article they published, says she is not coming back. Alawite women snatched from streets of Syria, and they're documenting many cases of Alawite women who were kidnapped by the thugs of the Jolani regime, and their parents received texts, SMS, phone calls from their the people who basically kidnapped them, saying she's not coming back, just forget about them. Those were 2 articles published this week, by the way, in Reuters. But there was something more personal happened with a woman in Jable. So what's happening basically, guys, in the country? It's the rapid Islamization or the Talibanization, let's say, of the Syrian society, even in the areas where people are not agreeing with this type of measures. For example, Jable, overwhelming the Alawites, and even the Sunnis are very moderate, and they don't want their women to be forced to wear a hijab or a niqab, or be told basically in the street by the Jolani's police that you need to change your clothes, you need to cover yourself, or they come and ask you questions like, they see you, for example, walking, let's say, on the shore with women, and they come and they ask you for your documents. Are you guys married? You guys married? How are you walking? How are you walking with a woman if you're not married? Right? So, what happened to Syria? From people who were free to wear whatever they want. You want to wear a burqa, you want to wear a niqab, you want to wear a hijab, you're free. And you want to not wear a niqab and just wear modest, you're free. But if you go to the shore to swim, to the beach to swim, what do you usually wear if you go there? Do you wear, do you cover yourself? No, you can wear a swimming suit for a man and for a woman. Now, these are all not allowed in Syria. And this is a woman sharing her experience, what happened with her in Jable. And I have translated this for you in English, just for you to understand what is happening on a daily basis with people just want to live their lives, they just want to buy groceries, live and walk freely. They don't want anything more than that, right? The most simple things. So this is a testimony of Dr. Riham Bassam Abdin. She's from Jable, Syria. She says, I am Dr. Riham Bassam Abdin, and I present the following before the public with full responsibility regarding what has occurred in the city of Jable. Dangerous practices that threaten civil peace and violate human dignity under the guise of religion and honor. In recent weeks, suffocating and bizarre practices have escalated in the city. Members of the public security or the general security and some youth with Islamic inclinations began attacking young men and women in the streets and parks. This was not mere religious advice, but blatant interference in clothing and behavior, accompanied by explicit verbal abuse that violated dignity and honor. Some individuals were even detained simply for being together, with another woman without legitimate ties, which means they were not married. In a city like Jable, where the social fabric is a blend of various sects and religions, we were actually aware of how dangerous such extremist actions are for civil peace and coexistence. Therefore, my colleague, Mrs. Sausan Jannoudi, Dr. Abdullah Aboud, and I decided to submit an official complaint. We went to the office of the district director. So the district director turns out to be a sheikh. His name is Sheikh Amjad Sultan, on June 26, 2025, at exactly 12:30 p.m. Dr. Abdullah had arranged the appointment in advance through the Sheikh's assistants. When we arrived at the building, we were told the Sheikh and his aides were performing noon prayers. So we waited respectfully until the prayer was over. But when Sheikh Amjad returned, he walked past us without even acknowledging us. He didn't greet us, instead asking the office assistants to prepare a cup of coffee, then closed the door behind him. We were surprised, but said nothing. After 15 minutes of standing, and there were no chairs, by the way, we were finally invited in by the assistant. We entered an air-conditioned, luxurious office. The sheikh was seated behind his desk, sipping coffee. He looked at us indifferently. We greeted him and extended our hands for a handshake. He refused to shake hands with me and Sausan, offering his hand only to Dr. Abdullah, so he doesn't shake hands with women. I whispered to my colleague, is this the person we came to complain to? He told us to speak quickly and briefly because he had many obligations. I began explaining what was happening: the assault on personal freedoms, imposition of religious dress codes, verbal harassment, and unjustified detentions. He remained focused on his phone, not even looking up, seemingly uninterested. Dr. Abdullah continued explaining that what was happening was unprecedented in Jable's history and was a blatant violation of the law. Sausan added, we thought we lived in a country governed by law, not by custom or personal whims. At this point, Sheikh Amjad erupted in anger. He said, enough, enough, enough. You're here to explain the law to me? We live in an Islamic country, and these are the customs of our ancestors. Hijab is obligatory, and immodesty is blasphemy. Anyone who violates this should be punished. Dr. Abdullah tried to intervene, but the Sheikh signaled him to be quiet and continued. We are proud of our youth who are zealous of religion. What they are doing should be generalized. Soon, anyone who doesn't close their shop during prayer time will be punished. You are the ones who should be held accountable for defending indecency and debauchery. What the fuck is that word? Debauchery. We were speechless, shocked, unable to process what we had just heard. We asked for permission to leave and walked out of that office with heavy steps, carrying in our hearts a deep disappointment. Not just in that official, but in the dream we once thought possible. Where did the Syria we dreamed of go? The Syria of diversity, equality, and coexistence. The Syria that was supposed to be built on freedom and dignity is still far away, very far away. So, this is it, guys. This is the new Syria. This is the freedom and the so much of freedom for the people to enjoy under such circumstances, so much of inclusivity, diversity. As I told you at the beginning of this show, this is the worst chapter in the history of Syria, of modern Syria. And they're selling it as it is a victory and it is, for the sake of the people. If you think that you cannot brainwash or persuade or intimidate enough people to be either silent or agreeing with such absurd things, you're mistaken. Humans are programmable people, and most people are fearful of intimidation and physical violence. So there's so many people who would not speak up now because they're afraid. I understand. But you also have, millions of people in Syria agreeing with this. This is something that I didn't expect, to be honest with you. And this makes me feel ashamed. As a Syrian, talking only as a Syrian, with no other consideration at all. Although these Julani minions always try to, say, but you're a Christian, you're a minority, you're an Armenian. But I have, for 14 years, spoke as a Syrian, and I spoke for the sake of the majority in the Syrians who probably now support Jolani. And I didn't want them to leave this chapter. And I believed that my job is to, there's so many journalists and these researchers and think tanks and stuff. Their job is just reporting what's happening. If it was the Assad or Jolani, it's just a career for them. But I had felt the responsibility to stop this outcome. You know what I mean? And this is the difference between me and many others. And this is also something, since we're speaking about Syria's very close and soon normalization of relations with Israel. You guys watch this channel and you also watch other channels. And I have no problem with that at all. On the contrary, you have the right to listen to different perspectives. But I'm really wondering, some of these people who you guys watch and these people say that they support Palestine, and then at the same time they supported the Jolani regime, and now mysteriously they are all of a sudden silent about it. Don't you think it would be the honorable thing to apologize at least that they were wrong about Jolani? Don't you think that it gives them more credibility if you apologize for being wrong? But this type of mistakes that they have done, and they say they are pro-Palestine, and then they support the Zionist takeover of Syria. It's very suspicious to me. It's very, very suspicious. This is all what I want to say. I want to thank, guys, our friend Black Tie for the generous support, and also for Gulnar, right? I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you so much also for the generous support, guys. For those who are watching this stream, if you like my content, today it was more like a local Syrian content. Tomorrow I may also address the Armenian issue. There are serious things happening in Armenia. Today I was on RT International. I was so surprised. I am usually used to 3 to 4 minutes of interview on Russia Today that you have to answer very quickly because they're like, you know? And they gave me like 17 minutes of platform to address the issue of Armenia, which seems it is a very serious issue. And I'm writing now an op-ed article, an opinion article about Armenia. For those who don't know, Pashinyan government is now coming after the Armenian Apostolic Church after he came after the Armenian national identity, trying to destroy it, and he gave up on the sovereignty of Armenia to Baku, and now he's coming after the Armenian Church. And I'm writing an op-ed article titled Armenia's Crisis Isn't Just Domestic, It is a Globalist Takeover, and I'm going to publish it tomorrow on my Substack. My Substack is Kevork Almassian, the same way it is written now on the screen. And there I will publish an article, and then I will make a short video from the text and will post it on my X account, on my personal X account. But tomorrow we could also expand the arguments, and especially how Pashinyan is acting as an executive director or a local player in the hands of the globalists to destroy Armenia from within. So if you're interested about also such topics, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button before leaving this stream, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be amazing. And if you like to do more and support the independent work I'm doing, you can become a patron, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. The link is scrolling on the screen. Or there are different other means in the description below if you don't like to use Patreon. So peace be upon you guys and upon your families, and I will see you tomorrow. Syriana Analysis. Salam.